Hey everyone, how you doing? Um, if you haven't already heard, Sidney Poitier has passed away at 94 years of age. Um, he was definitely an icon that he actually rose above the odds, because he was born several months prematurely in Miami, and they were originally from the Bahamas. And his parents were tomato farmers who traveled back and forth from the Bahamas, um, to Miami. And um, he had enormous challenges when, trying to break into the business of, acting in Hollywood. And he was the first black to win a black Oscar in that movie, Lilies of the Field. And so he spent a lot of time grappling with social changes during the civil rights movement. But he also spent, appeared in different movies, like In the Heat of the Night. And I actually loved watching In the Heat of the Night. That was a good series, and I loved watching it. He also was a doctor who wins over his wife, fiance, skeptical parents, and guess who's coming to dinner. Um, and in Lilies of the Field, he played an itinerant laborer who helped a group of white nuns build a chapel. Um, he done so much work, you know, when it comes down to you know being an actor in Hollywood. He even was scrutinized by black people, saying that he had portrayed them by taking on sanitized roles and pandering to whites. But I think that his struggles for distribution in the South and his choices of roles was limited to what white run studios would produce. Racial taboos, for example, precluded him from most romantic parts, but his dignified roles helped audiences of the 50s and 60s envision black people not just as servants, but as doctors, teachers, and detectives. Also, he had an interview with Oprah Winfrey where he tells her it's an enormous responsibility and he takes that responsibility. Basically, he owns that responsibility, in order to help others come behind him. There were certain things he had to do. He was the youngest of seven children. Again, was born several months premature in Miami on February 20th, 1967. And he was so small that he could fit into his father's hand. That small. He was not even expected to live. But you know what? He rose above those odds. His mom took him to, uh, a palm reader. And she told her not to worry, told his mother not to worry about your son. He will walk with kings. And he's walked with kings. I mean, when he was 15, his parents sent him to the Bahamas to live with the older brother in Miami, where they figured he would have better opportunities. His father took him to the dock and put $3 in his hand and said, "Take care of yourself, son." And he turned me around to face the boat. That's kind of scary. He turned me around to face the boat. $3 in his hand. But he didn't like Miami. So he headed to New York, where he tried his hand at acting. But you know what? He couldn't read. He was limited in schooling. But guess what he did? He got a job in a restaurant, and the fortuitous encounter changed his life because an elderly waiter took an interest in the teen and spent nights after work reading the newspaper with him to improve his comprehension, grammar, and punctuation. And he talked to him about what the punctuation was, the dots, what they meant, between two words and all of that stuff. I mean, and he read night after night after night, week after week after week. And then he landed work with the American Negro Theater, which he took acting lessons. It softened his Bahamian accent and landed a stage role as an understudy to Harry Belafonte. This led to roles on Broadway and eventually caught the attention of Hollywood. But you know what? He refused to take roles he felt were demeaning. Like in 1950's No Way Out, a North film in which he played a young doctor who must treat a racist patient. That led to increasingly prominent roles as a reverend in the apartheid drama Cry, the Beloved City, a Beloved Country, and then a troubled student in Blackboard Jungle and an escaped prisoner in The Defiant Ones, in which he and Tony Curtis were shackled together and forced to get along to survive. And with that 1958 film, Poitier became the first black man to be nominated for an Oscar. But for a dark-skinned actor in the 50s, finding complex roles was difficult. Blacks were so new in Hollywood, and there was also no frame of reference for except as stereotypical one-dimensional characters. And he said he had what was expected of him in mind, not just what blacks expected or what his mother and father expected, but also what he expected of himself. And he made a conscious decision to reject roles that weren't consistent with his values or that reflected badly upon his race. He told Winfrey that as a struggling young actor, he turned down a role that paid $750 a week because he didn't like the character, a janitor who didn't respond after thugs killed his daughter and threw her body on his lawn. You know, $750 was a lot of money back then, and for him to stay true to his values is important, because I think what you see a lot of today is people will do anything for money and they don't stay true to their values, and some of them may not even have set values, so we really don't know if anybody has really even set values, so we can't really say everybody has values or even follow a set of values. But he stayed true to his values, and he said he couldn't imagine himself playing a part like that, and they just didn't, his agent just couldn't understand why he wouldn't do that. But still, by the late 50s, he was landing regular acting work. He appeared in the first Broadway production of A Raisin in the Sun in 1959, and he starred in the movie version 2 years later. Then came Lilies of the Field, the biblical epic, the greatest story ever told, and the drama A Patch of Blue, in which his character had a chaste romance with a blind white woman. And spurred by his friendship with the more outspoken Belafonte, Poitier also began embracing the civil rights movement. He attended the 1963 March on Washington, and in 1964 traveled to Mississippi to meet with activists in the days following the infamous slayings of the 3 young civil rights workers. He also bristled with interviews questioning him too much about his experiences with racism. Racism was horrendous, but there were other aspects to life, he told Winfrey. There are those who allow their lives to be defined only by race. I correct anyone who comes at me only in terms of race. And then he had a year like no other in '67, one of the most remarkable years in Hollywood star has had before or since. He starred in 3 high-profile films, starring with To Sir with Love, a British drama about an idealistic teacher who must win over rebellious teenagers in a tough East London school. And by that time, Poitier was commanding $1 million a movie, and the filmmakers weren't sure they could afford to hire him. So they struck a deal to pay the actor scale, the minimum legal amount, in exchange for a percentage of the movie's box office grosses. Although common in Hollywood today, it was a radical ideal at the time and a savvy one for Poitier. To Sir with Love became a big hit, earning him a huge payday. And next up was Norman's Jewishans in the Heat of the Night, which gave Poitier his most enduring role. He played Virgil Tibbs, a homicide detective passing through Mississippi when he is detained by bigoted white police chief Rod Steiger as a possible suspect in the slaying. Tibbs reluctantly agrees to stay and help solve the case, and the 2 men eventually find a grudging mutual respect. The movie gave Poitier his most famous line, "They call me Mr. Tibbs," an indignant cry for respect after a demeaning slur by Steiger's character. In another memorable scene, Tibbs is slapped in the face by a racist plantation owner and then slaps him right back. Before agreeing to do the film, Poitier requested a script change to add the retaliatory slap and even rewrote his contract to prohibit the studio from cutting the scene. And of course, it is one of those great moments in all of film when you slap him back. That's very interesting. And he also said that he knew that he would have been insulting every black person in the world if he hadn't slapped back. He followed that film with Starkey Craner's Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, another message movie about racial tolerance in which his doctor character must persuade Spencer, Tracy and Katharine Hepburn's character to let him marry their daughter. The movie was released only 6 months after the Supreme Court made interracial marriage legal in all 50 states. However, around the same time, some black people began grumbling that Poitier's saintly, non-sexualized characters bore little resemblance to the complex realities of African American life. Black playwright Clifford Mason in the 1967 New York Times column argued that Poitier played essentially the same character in every movie. A good guy in a totally white world with no wife, no sweetheart, no woman to love or kiss, helping the white man solve the white man's problems. This criticism stung Poitier so much that he retreated to the Bahamas for months. And I think I remember that controversy um, when they brought it out later on, later on in life, in my life, when they brought that out about the controversy about him and saying that he was, um, sanitizing roads. And I kind of remember that, but not a lot, but I vaguely remember when they were talking about him, you know, I try not to, engage in things that I don't know a lot about when it comes to that kind of controversy. But I do recall that um, about, his criticism of the roles he played and that they didn't truly reflect, you know, African American. And so he lived through people turning on him. And he said it was a painful couple of years. He said, I was the most successful black actor in the history of the country. And he's telling Oprah Winfrey this, and the criticism he received was principally because I was usually the only black in the movies. Personally, I thought that was a step forward. And then he later became a director and turned to TV. So in the 70s, Poitier scaled back on acting and turned to directing, which he felt gave him more control over his film projects. He teamed up with his pal Belafonte for The Western Buck and The Preacher, his directorial debut. He directed and co-starred with Bill Cosby in the comedy caper Uptown Saturday Night, which, along with its spiritual sequels Let's Do It Again and A Piece of the Action, featured largely black cast. And in 1980, he directed Stir Crazy, the Richard Pryor Gene Wilder prison break comedy, which became one of his biggest hits. And although he faded as a big box office draw, Poitier continued to appear on screen sporadically into the 90s. Okay, most notably with Tom Berenger in the 1988 action thriller Shoot to Kill, with Robert Redford in the 1992 caper film Sneakers, and with Bruce Willis and Richard Gere in the 1997's The Jackal, his final film role. Okay, and he also believed he turned to television, where he was nominated for Emmys for playing U.S. Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall and South African leader Nelson Mandela in 2 miniseries. He also was considered for the role of President Josiah Jed Bartlett on TV's The West Wing, which eventually went to Martin Sheen. Martin Sheen, you know who he is. But Robert Redford was pretty popular. A lot of women like Robert Redford. A lot of women like Robert Redford. You might be one of those women that really like, Robert Redford. And then in 2000, Poitier had retired from acting, choosing instead to play golf and pen a memoir, The Measure of a Man, a spiritual autobiography in which he described his lifelong attempt to live according to principles instilled in him by his father and others he admired. In his later years, as Hollywood sought to recognize a man whose example had opened doors for so many other black actors, the accolades poured in. And in 2001, he received an honorary Academy Award for his overall contribution to American cinema. And then the following year, in accepting his Best Actor Oscar for Training Day, Denzel Washington said, 40 years I've been chasing Sidney. I always be chasing you, Sidney. I'll always be following in your footsteps. And then in 2009, President Obama awarded Poitier the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor, saying, it's been said that Sidney Poitier does not make movies, he makes milestones. Milestones of artistic excellence, milestones of America's progress. The Film Society of Lincoln Center bestowed its highest award on Poitier in 2011. Among the speakers praising him was filmmaker Quentin Tarantino, who said, in the history of movies, there has only been a few actors who, once they gain recognition, their influence forever changed the art form. There is a time before their arrival, and there is a time after their arrival. And after their arrival, Nothing's ever going to be the same again. As far as the movies are concerned, there were pre-Poitier and there was Hollywood post-Poitier. So may Sidney Poitier, at 94 years of age, rest in peace, and may his family have comfort along the way. You know, we have so much grief going on in this world today. A lot of grief. I even uh, lost someone in my family recently, and it hasn't been easy. Um, and so, just with that, with a lot of the deaths going on, and with this, you know, stuff going on, they don't want you to say it, but we know. You know what I'm saying? And but we give credit where credit is due, right? We give credit where credit is due. And I don't have anything bad to say, when it comes down to people setting, you know, paving the way for other actors. We just have to thank them and celebrate that they've paved the way for other people to come after them, right? And that's what we do. But again, Sidney Poitier, rest in peace, and may your family have the confident peace of knowing that he would walk with kings, and he's been able to do what he had to do, and he had a lifelong career. Were there struggles along the way? Absolutely. But he still had a lifelong career. And don't you forget that whatever you're trying to succeed at, you're probably going to have or already had struggles along the way. Don't give up. Keep striving, keep trying, and keep pushing forward. God bless you all on today. Bye.